I think it's the responsibility of the Correctional Service of Canada to identify safe, appropriate, community-based facilities.
Tonight, family members and supporters rally outside of Canada's largest prison outbreak of COVID-19.
We kind of shifted our focus from the men in the north helping the men in the community to the men helping the community now.
And from healing to helping, men of the north volunteer for their communities. Good evening, welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward. Today, the Prime Minister announced help for charities and nonprofits. As APTN's Todd Lamarand explains, more Canadians are relying on these organizations, but there has been a dramatic drop in both donations and volunteers.
Prime Minister Trudeau acknowledged that charities and nonprofits are being spread thin. So, he announced a $350 million emergency community support fund.
COVID-19 is putting a tremendous amount of pressure on those organizations because more people need help. For example, back in March, one United Way partner in Winnipeg made and distributed 1,475 emergency kits for families, seniors, and homeless people in just 5 days.
Trudeau said it will go to small organizations and larger ones like the United Way and Red Cross.
This is money for things like training volunteers, increasing at-home deliveries for seniors, or driving people with disabilities to appointments. With this fund, we're giving more resources to charities and nonprofits so they can adapt to the new realities and difficulties brought on by this pandemic.
The Minister of Families, Children and Social Development, Ahmed Hussain, also detailed how the funds will be spent.
This money will help groups like those in Eastern Ontario that are working to provide meals to those who cannot leave their homes, who are not able to do that. It could also help organizations such as the Atlantic Compassion Fund or the Vancouver Foundation, which is providing much-needed support to women who are fleeing domestic violence.
Federal officials also tried to reassure that food suppliers will prioritize Canadian markets over exports. This after the Cargill meat processing plant in Alberta closed due to hundreds of sick workers, including a death.
The food processing industry has been very proactive about being really clear that the priority will be to support and supply Canadian consumers.
Trudeau said the changes could mean higher beef prices. He also announced that a promise made weeks ago will be enacted. Next Monday, businesses will finally be able to apply for the 75% wage subsidy to keep workers on the payroll. Todd Lamarand, APTN National News, Ottawa.
50 senators have signed a letter calling for the government to consider a universal basic income in the era of COVID-19. Senators like Murray Sinclair, Lillian Dick, and others say giving Canadians a minimum income during the pandemic will do more than the current payout plan to protect people from falling through the cracks. Inuit Tapiriit Kanatami President Natan Obed told the House of Commons Standing Committee on Health today that Inuit face multiple vulnerabilities due to COVID-19. He said airlines that service the Inuit homeland bring drugs and medical supplies to communities and therefore provide essential services. Obed is concerned reduced flights could have devastating impacts.
At this time, it cannot be overstated how important air links are and federal support for those air links across Inuit Nunagat to remain intact. The last thing that we want is for any of our existing airlines to not be able to continue to operate, because that would place a massive consideration of risk on those populations in our communities above the already difficult challenges that we face.
In Manitoba, a First Nations advocacy group is calling for the development of an Indigenous oversight body to investigate police shootings. This month, 3 Indigenous people were shot and killed by Winnipeg police over a 10-day period. These deaths are being investigated by Manitoba's watchdog. But as Brittany Hobson shows us, the unit's track record has many losing faith in the system that's supposed to hold officers to account.
The Southern Chiefs organization is calling for change following the fatal shootings of 3 Indigenous people this month in Winnipeg. The organization, which represents 34 First Nations in Manitoba, says a special Indigenous body should be empowered to oversee investigations into police shootings. Grand Chief Jerry Daniels says systemic issues has resulted in Indigenous people being the victims of police violence at higher rates than non-Indigenous people.
So we want to have an oversight body that could help, perhaps strengthen the credibility of the investigative work or some of the frontline work. And hopefully that'll change maybe some of the attitudes, because it's there. We can't deny that it's not there.
In all cases, police say they were responding to reports of violent crime and were justified in using deadly force.
I don't know if there's another message that's being sent there. We were called for help and provided help in this instance.
The Independent Investigation Unit of Manitoba is tasked with investigating all serious incidents involving police. The unit is supposed to determine whether officers' actions are justified. Daniels understands the risks police face, but wonders if an Indigenous oversight body would lead to fewer fatalities.
And officers are given a great deal of authority and responsibility. And so when they conduct their actions out with our people, they should be done in a way that they've taken the best steps possible.
Daniels believes the Manitoba First Nations Police Service could take on a more investigative role. Advocate Michael Redhead Champagne says many community members do not trust the IIU.
Just having citizens and residents of like inner city neighborhoods or First Nations communities or Indigenous groups participating in governance with the IIU also could be a way to try to help kind of steer the ship in a more trustworthy direction so that Indigenous folks have a little bit more faith in this oversight body.
Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Still in Winnipeg, a Canada-wide warrant has been issued for a man wanted in connection with the death of his spouse. CTV's Josh Crabb now on why the warrant was issued.
42-year-old Wayne Leslie Melnichuk was reported missing April 12th. He's now wanted for manslaughter. Winnipeg police have issued a Canada-wide warrant for his arrest in connection with the death of 34-year-old Julie Rissette.
We are holding it together the best that we can.
Rissette's sister, Chastity Almas, confirmed to CTV News the couple lived together with their 3 children and had been in a relationship for the past 15 years.
We're just hoping and praying that the police find him and get some more answers.
Winnipeg police say Rissette died April 11th. Officers say she was taken to hospital from a home in the 500 block of Ottawa Avenue, where her sister confirms she lived with Melnichuk and her sons. Police say her death was initially thought to have been related to a medical emergency, but as officers started investigating, they found inconsistencies with that explanation.
We interviewed a number of people that were close to her, and it was after the post-mortem examination and more evidence came to light that we ultimately determined that Julie had been the victim of a homicide.
Among those interviewed, officers say it was Wayne Melnichuk himself. Police say he didn't become a suspect until later on in the investigation.
He was interviewed along with a number of people that were close to her, and that's part of a standard police investigation in order to find out more details. So it is something that happened. He wasn't a suspect at that point.
Investigators won't reveal where they think Melnichuk may be, but say they're working off a number of theories.
We're asking members of the public, if you happen upon him, if you come across this individual, please contact 911 immediately.
She was a joy to be around.
Almas says her family has been through a lot over the past week, in part because she too was under the impression her sister's death was due to medical reasons.
It's an extreme shock, disbelief, and then finding out that it wasn't what was initially stated threw us for an incredible leap.
Josh Crabb, CTV News, Winnipeg.
Time for a quick break, and then we'll take you to the site of Canada's largest prison outbreak of COVID-19. Stay with us.
Here's a look at Wednesday's weather forecast starting on the East Coast. +6 with showers for Halifax and Charlottetown. +1 and sunny skies in Nain. +4 for Cartwright. +1 in Montreal, -2 and snow in Saguenay. +6 under sunny skies in Toronto. +3 with snow for Ottawa. 2 above in Thunder Bay, 0 in Wawa. -6 in Churchill, +3 for God's Lake. +12 in Winnipeg and Dauphin, 13 above in Brandon. +16 with showers in Regina, 19 above in Estevan. +12 in Meadow Lake, 7 above in La Ronge. Welcome back. Family members and activists are trying to support prisoners locked up during the COVID-19 pandemic. They want officials to come up with new, safe ways of housing them. Tina House was recently at a safe distance rally outside of Canada's largest prison outbreak and brings us more.
And I love you. Your nieces and nephews love you. And then we're fighting as much as we can from the sidelines to get you the help that you guys need in there, because it's not fair.
Nicole Morton and her family are standing alongside others who are demanding that prisoners be released immediately from the Mission Institute in Mission, BC, including her brother-in-law Elwood, who's currently serving 18 years here in Mission. It's the site of Canada's largest outbreak of COVID-19, with 70 people testing positive. 60 of those are inmates, 9 are guards, and 1 is another staff member. Last week, one of the inmates died from complications from the virus. Today, a rally of about a dozen cars drove past honking their horns and displaying signs to send their message: let prisoners out before they contract COVID-19. The question is how to do that safely and not pose a threat to the public. Meenakshi Manoa helped organize today's event.
I think that we recognize right now the public is at risk of a public health crisis. For people who may pose threats or maybe have been sentenced on violent offenses, I think it's the responsibility of the Correctional Service of Canada to identify safe, appropriate, community-based facilities where people can be held. They cannot be held here.
Laura McElhenney says time is of the essence to prevent more deaths from happening.
We really need to prevent that as a community and as a nation with, a colonial history of incarcerating Indigenous people at an alarming rate, and that continues to this day.
And another outbreak has just been reported at the Ontario Correctional Institute in Brampton, with 60 inmates and 8 staff who have contracted COVID-19. Federal officials are scrambling to try and find out how it's spreading.
Right now, we have provided an epidemiologist to British Columbia to further understand what the transmission dynamics were in Mission, British Columbia, where there has been and is currently experiencing an outbreak. So we will be learning from those experiences. What we've been trying to do is to support them in terms of infection prevention control advice.
For Nicole and her family, she says the not knowing if he's okay is the worst part of this ordeal.
He needs to be able to contact us, and if they're not doing video visits or contact visits and they're not giving us their mail, then they should be allowed to call their family. And they should be putting everybody's number on there that they can. Like, they only get a small window, I have heard, to be able to come out and make phone calls and to shower every 5 days. That's wrong.
Tina House, APTN National News, Mission.
People who are homeless in the city of Prince Rupert in northern BC will be able to access temporary housing during this pandemic. BC Housing, along with the North Coast Transition Society, have found a new space that follows social distancing guidelines. The current shelter did not allow enough space for social distancing. Temporary shelter has been set up at Fisherman's Hall, which allows 6 feet of distance between beds. 20 additional beds were also secured at a local hotel if needed. NDP MLA Jennifer Rice worked with the city to provide the additional space.
It allows for social distancing and provides much more space, so it's a safer environment for everyone. So it is a temporary solution. We're working on a new permanent solution, so a new shelter that would be permanently located in Prince Rupert and, would be specifically designed for the needs of a shelter.
On Monday, the new Nazi government in Labrador announced a new program to address food insecurity during the COVID-19 pandemic. The new program will ensure beneficiaries of the Labrador Inuit Land Claims Agreement who live in the Goose Bay area have access to healthy food during the pandemic. Priority is being given to seniors, persons with disabilities, and low-income families. On Saturday, Indigenous Services Minister Mark Miller announced $2 million for Scotia as the Northern Ontario First Nation faces yet another year of spring flooding. The money is intended to help temporarily relocate the members of the James Bay Cree community to their spring hunting grounds. The plan to move was made by the community to avoid the threats of COVID-19 and floodwaters. According to the province of Ontario, only half the community of more than 2,000 have indicated they will go in the bush. The community is working with the province on a plan for the others. The death toll of Canada's largest mass shooting has risen to 23. The Mi'kmaq community has responded with ceremony to honor the lives lost. Angel Moore reports.
Deanne Sack reacted to the mass shootings with ceremony. An RCMP member for 23 years and a Sundancer, Sack joined community members at the RCMP detachment in Sebenegati First Nation north of Halifax and sang the honor song.
It's heartbreaking. There are no words to describe this nightmare that Mi'kmaq cannot wake up from.
Support also came from the Assembly of Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq Chiefs. Chief Sidney Peters said in a written statement that the Mi'kmaq of Nova Scotia mourn the losses of these individuals alongside our family, friends, and neighbours. At the RCMP detachment in Enfield, people laid cards and flowers, remembering the victims and RCMP Constable Heidi Stevenson. Trevor Chenier felt ceremony would help people and find peace. He offered to smudge the building and the space where Stevenson worked.
We got there and I took a deep breath, and it took a lot of strength to stay composed and smudge her workstation that she spent so much time taking care of us all unselfishly.
Mourners have started a sacred fire behind the RCMP detachment in Enfield, where it will burn for 4 days. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Chibuktuk, Halifax.
There are big changes for kids who are in the child welfare system during this global pandemic. Changes to visitation rights between kids and families is among the biggest. That's one of our topics tonight on a new episode of Face to Face with Manitoba's children's advocate, Daphne Penrose.
There is a direction to face-to-face visits not occurring, and that certainly is a change for families, and it's very difficult for kids. But I think the important message is, the visits are changed, and that workers and agencies and authorities and facilities need to be working very hard at trying to maintain that critical contact between families and their children, and making sure that kids feel connected with their family, and that may mean looking at a myriad of different resources or creative tools to do that, phone, Skype.
And you can watch that episode of Face to Face right after the national news. Time for another quick break, but when we return, how a men's group in Saskatchewan are giving back. Here's a look at the rest of Wednesday's weather forecast, picking back up in northern Alberta. Plus 13 for Peace River, 12 above in Grand Prairie, 18 above for Medicine Hat and Lethbridge. Showers and 12 in Vancouver and Victoria. 16 for Fort Nelson, plus 12 in Smithers. Minus 2 in Old Crow, 9 above with showers for Whitehorse. Plus 5 in Fort Liard, Trout Lake, and Fort Simpson with snow. Minus 10 in Sax Harbor, 7 below with snow for Colville Lake. Minus 14 in Chesterfield and Whale Cove. Minus 16 in Resolute, 14 below in Arctic Bay. Welcome back. A men's healing group in Saskatchewan used to meet in person for support, but COVID-19 ended that. Now they've found a way to help themselves and their community during this pandemic. Priscilla Wolf has that story.
In January, a group of men in La Ronge, Saskatchewan starts gathering for talking circles to help themselves heal. But because of the pandemic, Men of the North founder Chris Morasti says they are adapting to social distancing by helping their community.
The Men of the North is a support group that supports the men in our community. So we get together once a week, sometimes 2 times a week, and then we talk about those things we're not supposed to talk about. The men are healing themselves by taking action and helping elders and their community by pitching in. This pandemic hit. March 16th was our next meeting, but we had to postpone it during this pandemic. So we kind of shifted our focus from the Men in the North helping the men in the community to the men helping the community now. Morasti says 15 of the men volunteer their time on a regular basis to help with these deliveries. We are delivering groceries, prescriptions, cleaning supplies. We are unloading food trucks, shipments coming up to northern communities as donations. So we're cleaning, we're sanitizing everything. The delivery men are using protective personal equipment and delivering with no contact. We do got gloves, we do got masks, we do got coveralls, hand sanitizers, disinfectant sprays, anything else that we need to help us to avoid getting this virus. And then we deliver to your doorstep. We don't come into your home, we just deliver to your doorstep, we knock, and then we get back in our vehicles. People near La Ronge can go to the Men of the North Facebook page to contact them about getting help with their errands. Priscilla Wolf, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
Great work, gentlemen. And that's your APTN National News for tonight. For more, visit our website, aptnnews.ca. And stick around for an all-new episode of Face to Face. That's next. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to leave you tonight with a doubles jig shared online by proud dad Jeremy Chubb. This is Janine Chubb in the navy shirt and Shallow Chornaby. Hopefully you'll be seen there soon. They're 13 and 15 from Tatasquiac Cree Nation in Manitoba. Enjoy and have a great night.